So we're going to talk about the joys and challenges of filmmaking when the subject matter revolves around something that is very close to you, family. And it's a discussion about family and film, but it's also about the art and craft of filmmaking and telling a story, and it could be your own story. So I'm going to start with Ashley. And when you're drawing from your own life and someone close to you, it's so personal, and there are problems and issues that can arise. So, like, how do you approach that? How do you deal with that? You know, are you too close, or is there a way that you? I mean, where should you be too close? And I wanted to ask you about your film and your personal attachment to the subject matter.
Awesome. Well, I think to speak to the first part of your question, actually I'll speak to the second part first, and then I can use that as an example for the first part. My short film, The Goldfish, was something that is about adoption, and I'm adopted, and I hadn't seen that. Actually, after I started writing it, I realized that I hadn't actually seen that many experiences of adopted adults, like people who were adopted as children and who've grown up. Like, there's very little from our point of view. There's This Is Us, and maybe you're telling something personal, and it's like gonna be the thematic of your work forever. Maybe you're not ever gonna figure it out. But I think that's sort of the beauty and like why we connect to stories like we do.
You know, when she said, I don't know if you saw it, but is it today or was it yesterday? It was yesterday.
It's also online.
Yeah. So when she says, hi Mom, I want to fill up right now. It really is, that is just such a touching moment. I just want to ask you one other thing about, do people ask you what it's like? I mean, in the character is asked, what is it like to be adopted? And in this case, it's adopted by a white family, and she's African American. So is that a question that comes up all the time?
The question that comes up is like, oh, have you found your birth parents? Like, ever so casually at anything, it's like, wow.
Well, that's a deep riveting, bore into your soul kind of question.
Yeah, it's like, and I understand people's curiosity about it, but like at the same time, it's like, wow, it's kind of a personal question. And a lot of the things that that Audrey was going through, like in addition to being somebody who doesn't have children but has a lot of friends with children, has been a lot of baby showers. The film takes place at a baby shower, and so all of those questions are questions I've heard many times.
Hi. So, your film, how personal is this film to you? I mean, I know, but tell everybody else. And this is your directorial debut, and you also wrote the film, correct?
And I acted it as well. My film, I wish you all had seen it, but you'll see it tomorrow. But it's very close to me, very personal to me. It's actually a lot of different stories that I put together. And so one part of the story is my lead character is Billy, and she's a little girl with Down syndrome. And so I kind of came up with this character. It's twofold. I had a cousin named Billy. He was my favorite cousin, and he had Down syndrome, and he always wanted to be in a movie with me. And he passed away. I always try not to, but he passed away when I was in high school. And so, I was like, oh wow, I'll never get to be in a movie with Billy. So after I graduated college, I thought I was going to get this huge film career, and I didn't. And so I became a substitute teacher in special needs classrooms. And in there, I met a lot of Black children who, you know, when they found out I was a filmmaker, one, they were just like, oh my gosh, you're famous. And I'm like, you guys, I'm a substitute teacher. And they were like, no, you look like you're famous, you're famous. And they gave me a lot of like hope and a lot of courage to keep pursuing filmmaking. And so when they said they had never seen anyone that looked like them, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna write a story about, you know, a Black kid with Down syndrome. And so I named the character Billy, and I also acted in it, and so it was just twofold. So I did it for my students, but I also did it because, in a way, I was able to be in a movie with my cousin Billy. And another aspect of the story, it deals with drug addiction. And so when I wrote the film, a family member of mine had relapsed on drugs. And I just wrote a story about a little girl who wants her mom to come home. And for me, it was wanting, you know, my aunt to come home. And so, like I said, it's a lot of different layers to it. It'll make more sense once you see the film. But yeah.
And I'm going to ask all of you this too, but I'll ask for you first. So is that old adage, write what you know? Is it true? Does it help? Was it cathartic? And I know I saw an interview with you, I read an interview with you about how you felt after the movie was made, and that you went, there's a letdown. There's always a letdown after a production, but was that because of the fact that you were that close to Billy and the whole subject?
Yeah. No, actually, I write what I know, but I write like worlds that I've never seen before. I think the characters are who I know, and I put them in these like stories that I personally have never seen. But no, what happened after I made it, it wasn't because I was so close to my story. It was actually because I was a woman filmmaker, and I felt like my team didn't listen to me, and so the film that I got wasn't really the film that I wanted.
Ouch.
Yes, that's a whole other story from, you know, this panel.
Yes, exactly. That could be a whole other panel.
Yeah.
Thanks. So next I'm going to talk to you, Jules. Your children are in a lot of the movies that you make, and I saw some of the documentaries that you did with the twins, and also Asivak. I said that right? Asivak.
Think of Asivak,
Asivak.
Sorry, that's what I saw.
Asivak.
And then they remember.
So, in the documentaries, they're themselves, and they're wonderful. And I'm sure that, is that difficult? Do they have difficulty opening up to you? Do they just talk to you like that? That's one part of the question. But then, in the narrative films, are they listening to you as a director?
Before I start, I just have to introduce myself in my language. So, Jules, Koostachin, Niti, Sinikasu, Tem. So I'm Bear Clan. My spirit name is Woman Who Holds Fire, and I come from Treaty 9, which is Ottawapiskat First Nation in Northern Ontario, what is now called Northern Ontario, the swamplands, and I'm just really grateful to be, I think it's Lummi, ancestral lands of the Lummi people, so I'm really grateful to be here on their ancestral lands, so Chibi-Wedge. I forgot your first question. I need a freaking coffee. I started off at the other museum, I'm like, where is everybody? And he's walking so slow, I'm like, come on! Anyway. No, he walks really, really slow. Anyway. So your first question is?
Well, the first one was in the documentaries, they just, they're themselves and they just talk to you and they're so charming, and you're so charming, the boys are so charming.
Well, they take after their mom.
Yeah.
I think to answer that, I think I just finished my PhD, so I'm a big nerd too, and I'm a mom of 4 kids. And when I was younger, I was like in my early 20s when I had my 2 older boys. So we faced a lot of adversity and poverty and everything else you can imagine. But I think it's important to say too that I grieve the loss of my career. It's something that I wanted, and it's not like I regret anything, but I feel like when you're a single mom with kids, you have to let certain things go and negotiate and so forth. So I was like an up-and-coming actor. I was up for the role of Legends of the Fall. And I'm Native, and I don't think the person was. So, there's a lot of issues in the industry. But anyway, they want me to dye my hair, and I was a huge activist. And I was like, this is what I look like. Take it or leave it. And I found out Brad Pitt was in the film. Dyed my hair purple. Anyway, whatever, it is what it is. That's a big regret. Anyway, so I feel like part of my methodology is, I grew up in community. My grandparents did not speak English. They were both hunter-trappers. We lived off the land. We didn't have electricity or water. My mom's a residential school survivor. She went from age, I think you call it boarding schools here, so she went to school from age 5 to 16. So English is her second language. So I was immersed in my culture, cultural, practical way, protocols and so forth. So I feel like with my documentary work, I consider it almost as an Indigenous archive. So I'm thinking generations ahead that we get to capture some of our elders and so forth in the language. So with my kids, I think it was Niso Tewak in OChiSkwaCho, which translates Niso Tewak, our belief. Is there any twins in the house? Yeah, so our teaching is that if you are a twin, you have the same soul but living in 2 different bodies. Or if you're triplets, you're one soul living through, that's why there's such a strong connection. With that particular film, the twins were 10 at the time, and I got them to, come up with their own questions. So we had no idea what they were going to ask us. And that was a bit scary, but it is what it is, and it actually worked. So I really wanted it to be kind of in real time and allow them to kind of ask critical questions about what it's like to be a twin. What is their identity as a twin? And I think it worked out quite well. Even the broadcaster, like CBC's our big broadcaster in Canada, they had no idea that I was, because they always want to see your questions. I was like, nah. And I feel like with those, I do a lot of cultural films, so I kind of let them play out. But I feel like as someone who's Indigenous, I feel like it's my responsibility as a storyteller to sustain these stories the best way that I can. And to follow protocol and so forth. In terms of script, and also, let's make this short, I feel very comfortable in documentary. Like I'm not nervous, like I'm just really, and I'm also a trained counselor too, so doing questions and asking questions and stuff is I'm comfortable. Scripted stresses me right out. Oh my God. It's just like, I'm learning, I'm honing my skills and stuff, and I feel like I'm getting better. But like I said the other night, I said, you only get good at things once you do them, and you keep doing them, and you learn from your mistakes, and you're open to that process. So yeah, my kids definitely don't listen to me when I bring them. I get like the evil eye on set. And I just did a film called Mystic. It's a post-apocalyptic film with 3 of my boys. My other boy was behind the scenes. And I swear to God, my twins were the biggest divas. They were just they were giving the DP dirty looks because he was taking too long to take the shot. I'm like, who are you guys? But anyway. But I mean, that's a good film. I'm really happy with that. And then they told me, we're never gonna watch this film, Mom. I was like, what's wrong with you guys? Anyway, but they did a good job, and I'm really happy with that film. But yeah, I think it's they're both very distinct art practices, and I honor both processes, but I'm way more comfortable in documentary. But I'm okay with being uncomfortable and learning and being a student, and I love mentoring, and I love being a mentor, and I feel like, it's a learning process for sure. And there's a lot of prep, and OChiSkwaCho that we watched on Friday night, we actually pumped that film out in 3 weeks. So that was pre-production, production, and post-production in 3 weeks. And I realized after that's really fast. I was like, oh, duh. Anyway, that was at the Dow Center. Sorry, that was long-winded. I need to
No, it's
pause here.
great.
they don't say, we don't want to be in another film
Oh,
of yours.
they don't have a choice.
Okay. So Asivak. So, well, you can speak to what it's like being directed by your mother, but if you can be. And the other thing too is I noticed on one of your films, I mean, you were a PA as well, and did you just still photography, or did I read that wrong? So you were crew as well. I don't know, I thought I read that.
Oh no, they always make my kids do sound. It's like child labor and stuff.
So, okay, so the difference between being the actor and taking direction from your mother, but also being a crew person and taking direction.
Gotcha. Hello, everybody. My name is Asivak, Koostachin. For me, there's no difference at home and on set, working with my mom or living with my mom. It's always been that dynamic, her way or the highway kind of thing. So that transition to film was an easy one for me, mainly because it came to the home. Like I didn't have anywhere else to go. It was being filmed there. Our shorts were being filmed there and close by. So my whole life I've been around film, and we have a really good relationship as son and mother and director and whatever role she wants me to play
COVID.
or do. Yeah, she made me COVID compliance officer. And there was no COVID. So,
Oh yeah. COVID's
yeah, so the dynamic between us has always been really good. She, or rather, whenever I claim something or do something, I have to acknowledge that it was because of her. And I'm referred to as her mini-me, in the ways. And it's all loving and great and whatnot. I'm really proud of her and just supporting everything. And yeah, I have no complaints. However, my other three brothers, they all complain. I don't know why. I really don't know why. Just different personalities, I guess. Yeah, but they love it secretly, you know. In families, it's like there's so much resistance, but they love it. So.
Sorry, Bishop.
What about
Directing him.
No, I'm not.
That's the direction?
Nothing is just looking this way.
Yeah, it's really great working with my mom.
No, that's
It is.
sincere.
Did you have to say that? That was part of the deal when you came out here, right? You worked that out. So I'm going to move on to Nancy, and Nancy's film is going to be screened tonight, correct? Pasang in the Shadow of Everest. And that is a lofty accomplishment for her and a lofty way to tell that story, especially since you have close ties with your brother-in-law. So tell me about the responsibility of telling that incredible story, and you have to see this movie, it's phenomenal.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. I'm so happy to be here. And I would say just that question, it feels like a really big weight. And I also want to say, to start, that I think I could really use some mentorship, because 3 weeks. It took me over 10 years to make this film. And it was my first feature documentary. And it, So the way I came to the story, for those of you who don't know, is my sister Karen, who's sitting right here with the camera, married Dorji Sherpa. And we all live in the Bay Area, and I started to get to know Dorji a bit, and one night at dinner he told me the story of his sister. And Dorji was born in Nepal. He's Sherpa. Sherpa is an indigenous group of people in Nepal. A lot of people don't know that. They think that Sherpa is a job. But he told me the story about his sister, who was the first Nepali, the first Sherpa woman to summit Everest back in 1993. 1993. And at the time, Nepal was, in the 90s, was a Hindu kingdom. And Sherpas are Buddhist. And as a result, about less than 10% of the country is Sherpa, and really a religious and cultural minority. The caste system, very prevalent. And the Sherpa, as Buddhists, as an indigenous people, were actually outside of the caste system. Hence the term outcast. And in addition to being, the cultural religious minority, she was a woman. And women were basically, and I'm going to let Dorji speak in a minute, but, relegated to staying home, having kids. His parents wanted her to have arranged marriage and stay in the village, and which, was high up in Himalaya, and without Dorji got to go to school. His brothers went to school. She wasn't allowed to go to school. And so, he's telling me the story, and that how she persevered 3 failed attempts, and then finally summiting on her last try, or the 4th attempt, and then, being caught in, I won't go into a lot of detail, you can just see the film tonight, but ended up dying on the descent along with one of her summit partners. And the country just erupted. It was that she had really become a very popular figure because she represented so much to women and to people who really didn't have courage to do, I think, what she was doing. It was unprecedented what she did. And so, I just want to say for one little story that I think is really illustrative of, or illustrates well. In the film, she has an audience with the Prime Minister, and we happen to have this footage, this amazing footage right on Nepali TV, and again, remembering that she is this cultural and religious minority. She's a woman, and would have been taught that she really shouldn't make eye contact with official men, right? And she's sitting in this audience with the Prime Minister challenging him, and it's just extraordinary. And so when I learned about this story, obviously this was, and Dorji can talk about his, when his sister climbed, and he wasn't in Nepal, and there was a great weight that Dorji bore, being the eldest son, and then her kids. She had 3 kids, and we went to Nepal, Karen and Dorji, my husband, I have twins, and I met Pasang's daughter for the first time, and her name's Dawa, and she was 12 when her mom died, and she told me that night that I met her that she never talked about her mom's death. They'd been sent off to boarding school soon after that, and so and she was not about to talk about it that night. And it took me several years to build a relationship with her to the point that she would actually be on camera with me and tell her story, what she remembered. But all of this is to say that I knew this was an incredibly sensitive story. The family had not really grieved, I think, and yet she's this amazing public figure in Nepal. So they read about her. Nepali children are taught about her in their textbook. There's a big statue, life-size statue of her in Kathmandu, and she had a postage stamp and a mountain named after her, a strain of weed the government went overboard after they realized that they really, fucked up because they didn't support her in her climb. And nobody's ever told the story. And I interviewed all of these young Nepali climbers, who all of them cite her as their inspiration for saying that
they could do something like this, because it's not, again, something that women normally do. And so, yeah, extreme weight. So I'm going to let Dorji maybe talk about the weight he carried.
Well, I want everyone coming for a rainy day to show up here and listening to that we discuss about this film. I appreciate it, and I want to say thank you to Mo and then Diana for inviting us to their open house, and the committee of all the members who organize the events. And without you guys, we won't be here speaking. So I really appreciate that, and letting us share some sad stories and some proud moment stories and all this stuff. And for 3 weeks, I was like, oh my God. So I'm the elder brother in my family. We have 4 boys and 1 girl. And 1 girl is the one that Pasang. And we always wrestled, fought. I think was lots of her mental and physical strength came from all the 4 brothers, because we compete. She never thought that she's less than us. She always fought against us. And I'm the elder brother. I said, hey, calm down. It's like, no wrestling. And eventually, when she turned 14 or 15, we have an arranged marriage system in Nepal. And I found out that's a really bad idea. The reason the parents do arranged marriage is they want to make sure they're well set in whoever the person is marrying, they're well off to take care of your daughter. So that's part I found out, and I investigated with my dad, and why you do this? Why you know? So anyway, she never wound up going to the arranged marriage, and she met her husband when she was 18, 19. She was going trekking with my dad. My dad used to lead people to the mountains, and she always wanted to go. My dad said, no, you stay home, help mom, you know. Three of us had education up to high school level, which is, I found out my high school level was not good enough here when I moved here. We have a 10 class, like class 10 level only. We have to go, like, when we come here, we have to go 2 more years junior college to finish the high school, I found out. So anyway, so she was always wanted to go with my dad climbing mountains and, do things that she's the girl she's not supposed to do. And also, I just found out since we started, producing this movie, and I learned more thing about our group. There are only 380,000 Sherpas. We are considered as the indigenous group. So we're losing our language. There are intermingling marriage happening now, and all the younger generation, they're losing their ethnicity, culture, and the language. So that's the good, positive part is they getting educated, not so focusing on only like hardship climbing or whatever. And anyway, my sister wanted to have a trekking company, which is you organize the trip to the Himalayas, and her husband and she met, and we struggled a little bit. My family are not happy because
It's in the movie, correct?
Yeah.
In the documentary.
And then somehow they wind up, eventually we accepted, and they got married and had the kids, and they opened the trekking company, and they're leading expeditions, and her husband accepted her as her business partner, his business partner. So she was interested in climbing, that's why she started climbing.
Right, and that's what
Yes.
And that's what
Yeah.
10 years of work artwork of the
Yeah.
story is about that you're going to see on screen. This
A lot
evening.
of time and effort, it makes a lot of fundraising and traveling, and especially Nancy travel quite a bit in Europe. Every time we are like, oh, we're done, and then we're finding other materials that, offering us, hey, we have this particular materials, then we have to redo it again, she had to redo it again. So it took some time.
Right. I mean, as you were saying that, the persistence of women is always what strikes me, is that that was the fight that she had to do what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
The difficulty it is for us as women filmmakers to be accepted as women filmmakers, and then also to tell stories that are not often told, and that's a huge responsibility. I mean, every one of the subject matter are stories that there's not enough said about adoption and what that's like, and there's not enough said about autistic children and not good stories. There's not enough good stories about drug addiction, that either. And with you carrying wanting to further and tell the stories of Indigenous people, and so there's a responsibility. I'm going to ask you about that, about how, like, when did you decide to make this is your life of what you're going to do. This is your life's work, and I would like each of you to answer that question.
Do you guys know the National Film Board of Canada? Okay, do you have like a documentary station or something? In the 70s, when it rained in my city, they pulled all the kids in and we watched the most boring documentaries in the world. So I think that's probably why and how I was inspired. But there's always this didactic, the voice of the white man. Now the Indian is walking across, whatever. And I'm just like, oh my God. And then, Adanisa Bomswin? She's one of our Indigenous documentary matriarchs. I think she's 88 right now, and she's made, 60 documentary films. So I remember she made a film called 270 Years of Resistance about the Oka crisis, and I was in university at the time in theater. And that changed my whole life, because that was the first time in my life that I heard the didactic voice of the white man being replaced by an Indigenous woman. And holy crap, did she rock the world. She just she was up in people's faces, and I was like, oh my God, this woman's gonna get arrested. I was watching the movies, and I was like, I've never seen anything like it. And that was my inspiration, is seeing these strong women. And in my language, CASCADIA means woman, CASCADIA means fire. So we have a strong fire within us. And I've seen that with a lot of women in my life, and they face so much adversity. And even myself, the challenges are just nonstop, but we still stand up, and we're stronger in numbers. So I feel like documentary for me is a way to kind of tell the stories that I want to tell without people telling me how to tell them. And I think I offer an alternative, no, I'm just kidding, perspective.
You said that, I wonder.
My partner actually took credit for that, but it was mine. But anyway, I'll let him have it. We're both academics as well, but he's a big nerd. I think I'm bigger. Anyway, whatever. But I wanted to add too, I think it's really, as a woman too, I found a path in academia because that was my way out of poverty. And, I wanted to add that too, because I just finished my PhD. It was a big deal navigating through a colonial institution, let me tell you, where Indigenous knowledge is not always accepted. But I feel I was offered a tenure track position to teach at a university when I finished, or right before I finished my PhD last year. And I turned it down to focus on film, 100% on film, and I haven't had to live in my car yet. So I feel and I raised my kids, they're all raised. I did whatever I could to make sure that I raised 4 strong men who are critical thinkers and respectful of women and storytellers. So, sorry, I have to backtrack because I have to say that because I feel now I'm in a place where I can focus on myself and be selfish, but also be the matriarch in my family. And I feel I hold when I work in Indigenous community, the stakes are high for Indigenous filmmakers because you have to get it right. You can't, like, we have a history or a herstory or their story, people coming into our communities, taking our stories, and we don't know where their stories are going or how they're being told. So that's why my whole PhD is on protocol. How do we do this right? Representation matters. How do we, develop relationships with our allies and so forth? So for me, if I go into a Native community and I mess it up, someone's gonna call my mom. But these are our relationships. Like the Native film community is very small where I am, and I think moving up here into the States as well. I mean, there's a whole other community here, but we have to get it right. And there's due diligence as well. You do your research, like you're talking about, develop relationship. Take however long it takes to birth that story, right? If you're in labor for a freaking long time, but once that baby's out, once that movie's out, it's gonna live its own life. And that's where that Indigenous archive comes in, because that film becomes a life, has a life of its own. And it's gonna continue to inspire and change perspective, and it's gonna contribute to our overall story of humanity. So anyway, I feel like for me, definitely the stakes are high, and I don't even know what your question was, but I just really need a coffee.
And that's why you have to get it right. Because everything you do put out there,
And you make mistakes. I mean, we're human. There's no word in my language for mistake. So you gotta think too, like I come from a Cree language, which is a very descriptive language and an ethos that's very, specific to a location, to a landscape. So when I speak English, it's a very different way of thinking, but there is no word for mistake in our language. There's no word for art. So when we're in the zone, we have to respect that creative space. And we have to, respect the fact that we're human beings. We're not gonna be perfect. We have to learn, right? So anyway.
passes their responsibility of a filmmaker to yourself and to the story that you're telling. I'm carrying my weight.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's tell you that.
No, the filmmaker does have a responsibility. I'm trying to think how I want to answer this. I think for me, my responsibility in filmmaking is, I think we were talking about, I think it was Lara that was talking about diversity. And so diversity is really important to me. But for me, diversity doesn't just mean like, because I'm Black, making like movies with Black characters. It meant like even extending it beyond that. And so, including, characters with disabilities or characters that are larger, like myself, just really like going beyond just making stories that are Black, but finding even the more, I guess, nuanced stories of, Blackness that we haven't seen yet. And so that's one of the, I guess, ways that I would say I'm here as a filmmaker, especially with this one. I think up until then, I am a screenwriter, and so I have like a lot of like really silly YouTube stuff out there. This I'm really proud of. It's done very, very well, but I was like, I want to challenge myself, and I want to make something that is, serious, something that people that aren't normally, seen on, people might not see themselves in something typically can watch this and see themselves in. And so, but I think the biggest responsibility as a filmmaker is telling the story that you want to tell and making sure it looks the way that you want to look. So that's what I was saying, with my film, it was my first time directing. I got a significant amount of money to shoot it, and I was scared. And so I kind of took way too much advice from other people when it came to directing. I didn't trust myself at all. And so there were shots that I think would have looked better. I made a shot list and I didn't share it. And then my producers, we made a shot list together. And that's the shot list I went with because I was so afraid, like, if I use everything that I make myself and the film is like awful, then it'll be my fault. But if I, use the suggestions of other people and something happens, and it's not my fault. And so I think with my film, I learned, you know, two things: visibility, but also I do think the biggest weight is trusting yourself as an artist. And I think that you can use that in any application in life, whether it's your career, art, just trusting yourself. You are much better than you probably think you are, and it's better to fail being who you are than to, you know, succeed off the advice or, I don't know, of other people. So don't be afraid to fail, but you probably won't fail.
You know, and you don't, as a filmmaker, you don't want to have any regrets when you're seeing that on scene. You know, you just, I'm really thrilled that you said that. Because it's true, because people, for women, I mean, this is a little off topic, but as a woman director, you are challenged on set. You know, even if you're working with friends who respect you, you know, and often what I do is I try to surround myself with people who do respect me,
Yeah.
so that I don't have to.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't have to do this, and I don't have to say, no, this is my vision, and you will do what I say.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's not me either. I don't come across that way. I don't.
But sometimes you have to.
Yes, exactly.
I didn't want to be that person either. But I was like, you know what, next time I'm going to be like, this is, because once we got on set, I was just like, oh, we're getting that shot list, we're doing what I want. And everyone was just like, no, we're not. And I was like, no, we will. And they were just like, all right, we're moving. I'm like, oh. So sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
But it's scary because then you can be labeled as like the woman that's hard to work with, even though it's your crew. It's not you.
It's true, folks. So, you talk about responsibility as a film.
I think that, you know, and you also talked about like right way, you know, and I think that the follow-up sentence to that like we don't hear that often is like right way, you know, to be like emotionally true. It's not like you don't have to write your biography and everything you do, but you do have to trust that like your inner life, your experience is going to carry you into everything that you tell, and you have to take responsibility for that. And so, you know, for example, on this project, the lead in my film is a Black woman who's a transracial adoptee in my story. And so I listen to a lot of stories. I listen to like a lot of transracial adoptees talk about themselves and their experience. I thought about how it was different from my experience, but also how a lot of us are struggling with like very similar questions about our identity. And so to tell the story, it was important for me as the storyteller to take responsibility in my casting, to also, you know, listen to my actors, especially my actors who don't have the same experience than me. Like, I had a lot of mothers on my cast. I don't have children. And so, you know, to really take my actors' notes and their thoughts about it seriously, I think is another part of the process where, just in terms of carrying the weight of telling any story, you have to know where your blinders are. You have to know, and you have to be really connected to like what is the truth of what you're trying to say for yourself. Relevant? Okay.
Nancy, do you have anything more to say about the responsibility which we addressed earlier? And were you a filmmaker before you decided to do this, or did the story? The story is what created you as a filmmaker.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, it was extraordinarily hard in some ways. I mean, I had a whole career in business and, you know, managed big teams and so but I'd always, I think, identified in my heart and soul as an artist, as a storyteller. I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, I loved stories, people done plays in the neighborhood. I mean, I'm a singer, And I had sort of abandoned all of that because I had to support myself, and I kind of fell into a career because my voice teacher from Minneapolis introduced me to her friend who was a singer in San Francisco when I moved there, and then that's what started my career because she worked at a hospital. I mean, it was like crazy. I mean, I just let go of, you know, all of my dreams, I guess, of I don't know, crazy childhood, you know, the things that really fed me. So when I came back and made this decision, I mean, I would say that it in some ways it was a hard decision, but in some ways it really wasn't, because I was so moved by the story, and I am moved by stories, and that's what I believe about film and about stories, is that they move people to change their lives, and that's the power of doing what I'm so privileged to be doing now, and sitting up here with these you know, other extraordinary women and men who believe that too. And so, you know, I mean, the first thing I did was to go find people who would mentor me, right, and who were seasoned filmmakers who could give me advice. But along the way, I mean, there was this, I mean, I felt that, on the one hand, this extraordinary pressure, because I'm telling the story of my family and of this woman who, you know, was so controversial and so revered, both in Nepal. And here I was, like, just feeling my way. I mean, I always felt like I was feeling my way. And so trying to trust myself was really hard, because I did bring on amazingly talented people who believed in the story and somehow believed in me. And, you know, I had an Academy Award-winning editor, you know, I mean, and these people who trusted, I guess, me, but I made some god-awful mistakes along the way, and you know, I mean, I spent $100,000 on animation that I had to throw away because it just didn't work, and you know, and because we didn't have enough footage, you know, we didn't have everything. Nobody, there was no film, nothing on record about the last climb, and how do you tell a story about a woman climbing Everest if you don't get footage of it? And so, I mean, I pursued this whole animation thing, I mean, to the point that it just about killed me. I mean, it was so horrible. Well, that's actually something that I'm thinking about. Yeah, thinking about that, because I have a lot of animation. but yeah, I mean, you know, so I mean, I felt this incredible responsibility to my family and to all these people who, you know, love Pasang and to this country. And I also felt responsibility to all of these people who have believed in me, these artists, then my crew, you know, people who signed on to be on this film, and to these people that gave me money. I mean, raising money, that is the hardest thing. I mean, the single hardest thing. And so, you know, I felt this responsibility to these people who believed in me, this, you know, unproven entity, and to make a film that was worthy of the subject. Right?
Thank you. And I have actually a million more questions, because when you're having a great conversation with such illustrious people, they always have a lot to say, and you can learn from them, as I have. But our time is up, I'm sorry to say, and it's been an honor for me to be with all of you, and thank you again for inviting me, because this is one of my favorite festivals. I love it here. So keep going back. So keep it.
One last remark, because I know I said a lot about being upset with being upset with being on set. But I know there's a lot of like Marshawn fans here, and so I would talk about it. Yeah, so on my after we finished shooting, he went to everyone on my set that gave me a hard time, and they were talking about how they worked with Ryan Coogler, and they worked on like Academy films. And so he called Ryan Coogler and was like, "Oh, I'm here with some people that worked on your film." And Kugler was like, oh, cool. And he was like, yeah, don't ever hire them again. And he was like, they were so rude to their director. And he was like, I would have made this phone call on the first day, but I didn't want her to be without a crew. But so I'm making it now. And he was like, I won't share your names with Kugler if you apologize to your director right now. And don't ever treat a woman like this on set again.
Well, that's the thing, you talked about,
Just
talk about allies. Yes, it is.
That's a whole other panel we need to. But thank you, good for him.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank all of you very much for being here this morning and sharing all your, insights and stories. They're just great. And be sure you see the short films this afternoon and tomorrow so you can catch them. I just received a note that Pasang is sold out. So if you have a pass, if you are an all-access pass person, be sure you get there early so you can get your seats before all the individual ticket holders. If you haven't bought a ticket and you want to see it, come anyway, just in case we have some no-shows that we could sell the tickets. But that's exciting news. And please come. And to continue the conversation. Tonight, we have the director's party at Makeworth Market. If you haven't bought a ticket, please do. It's always so much fun. It's catered food, and there'll be music tonight, and we present the Laurels certificates to all of our filmmakers at that time, and then you can talk to everybody. It's just always a great time, and we'd love to have you come. It's open to the public and whatnot. So we have to be out of here by noon, so please, go on out to the street if you want to talk to people. Those of you filmmakers who are going on the guided tour at the museum, the theater, just meet me outside of the steps and we'll walk over together and get that tour. And we've got a docent guided tour of the Mount Baker Theater lined up for them. So if any of you would like to join us, I think there's probably room, but we would love to have you. So thank you all so much for coming this morning.